Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the 107th episode of the Truth Island podcast. Several weeks into 2021, with a new president, the future still remains relatively unknown. Many Americans have questions as to what the future will bring. When will they be vaccinated? Will there be jobs waiting for them when this is all over? And if America in general will return to the state that it once was in. Uncertainty is something that most people wish to avoid, as nothing is a greater source of anxiety. And yet, the tunnel of darkness need not always take us to an even bleaker chapter in human history. The chaos and loss of life experienced during World War II was followed by a decade of growth, home ownership, and a quality of living that the world had never experienced up until that point. The ancient religions of Taoism and Zoroastrianism stress the importance of this duality, that our life is a constant battle between the unknown darkness versus the knowledge of light. However, what remains often misinterpreted in this eternal sequence is that neither one of these forces represents good or bad, but simply natural. For example, most of us, as of right now, would love to live lives of extreme certainty, predictable jobs, predictable paycheck, and maybe even a predictable lover. And yet, without uncertainty, nothing ever changes. If man had always had enough meat to eat, he would never have invented agriculture. The unknown is scary at first, as it initially robs man of life and prosperity in the first wave, and yet in the second provides him abundances that he never thought possible. There is no doubt that 2020 took away a lot from us: businesses, social opportunities, and above all else, human lives. And yet, within the midst of this darkness, the potential to discover something new has never been greater. Helping me to find some certainty, I am once again joined by Kenny. Kenny, I expect us to have all the answers by the end of the hour, right? Like, I can't stand this uncertainty anymore. We just can't move forward.
Certainly. Um, well, I think that's uncertainty is it's incredibly scary. I mean, it's one of those things that is hu- human nature is very antagonistic towards uncertainty. I
Yeah.
mean, we have the weather apps literally trying to predict what the next few weeks and months are going to look like on the most. I mean, it's very mundane. I mean, if we lived in a time when when the weather was an incredible how you say um factor in our lives. Usually these days it's not. You have a car, you don't have to walk in the rain, right? You have a pretty sturdy house. It's not going to blow away in the wind and so forth, but we still like knowing what the weather is going to be, a week or two from now. Same thing with our, we don't like episodic releases anymore. We like the whole show being released all together. So first episode to the very last, everything's certain and served to us pretty easily.
I think we need to talk about the weather. I think that's actually, people think that the weather is actually one of the most mundane topics, but I think in this example, it's actually a pretty apt example. And you're right, we love to control the weather, especially when we're going on vacation. We want to know, oh, okay, Tuesday it's raining, that's museum day. That's the day we're going to the museum. That's it. We want to know these things because we want to control, and we think that that control is going to allow us to cultivate the optimal experience. So if I know that it's going to rain on Tuesday and Thursday, well, I can plan accordingly so that my vacation doesn't get ruined and I have some kind of cool
Yeah.
indoor activity. And we think that's going to bring us happiness. We think that being in control of the planning and the development. But I want to ask you this one, okay?
Mm.
Let's just say we reached a point in science, right? And forget about, the ecosystem, forget about, it needing to rain for crops and for plants and so forth. Let's just say that there was a magical way, right? Just forget about the logic here for a moment. If there was a magical way for human life to continue, and every day was a gorgeous sunny day, high of 75 degrees, low of, 68. Every day was just magical and gorgeous and beautiful, and it was totally sustainable. Would you take that?
Would I take that?
Yeah, would you take
Personally,
that? Would you personally take that? Every day is
I
sunny and perfectly temperate weather.
I wouldn't take that.
Okay. Tell me
I
why.
would I wouldn't take that for the world. I wouldn't take that, and especially if I was the same person that I am today.
Mhm.
I wouldn't take that knowing that that was not. I wouldn't take it because I would know. I would be certain that that was not reality.
Mhm, mhm.
That it was all artificial. It was all fake. It was all manufactured. So it's basically the difference between a newborn, an actual child, newborn child, versus, a make believe Barbie that's, like a modified, perfectly, let's just say even an imperfect newborn versus a genetically modified newborn.
Super
To
baby.
me, a super baby. Like he has all the things, sure, that every father or mother would want, but there's something totally unnatural, totally artificial about him.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I like that you use the word unnatural. And there is a place where the weather is pretty nice all the time, and it's called LA. And and a lot of people, like if you ask, if it's especially where I am in New York, it can get pretty darn cold here in the winter, and it can get pretty nasty out here. And if you ask any New Yorker during the winter, hey man, wouldn't you like to go live in LA or whatever? They're probably like, hell yeah, not, it's 80 degrees there right now. I'm going to have a lot of fun and go surfing and so forth. But what I notice about people that live in California year round is that eventually they start taking the weather for granted. They
Mm.
start, it kind of just melts away. And I think after a while, it probably just becomes boring. It becomes boring that every day is sunny. It becomes boring that every day doesn't bring any challenges. Like as annoying as snow is, it does create a different experience. It does create like people who grew up in like the Midwest or in the South where it's a lot hotter and they come to New York and they see their first snowdrop. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of
Yeah.
amazing to deal with something that you've never experienced, and it kind of just brings a different part. You wear different clothing, you wear different boots, different jacket, and so forth. And I think there's something that we need that change and we need that challenge. And I think that a lot of us lament like, oh man, I miss the days of like working for the same company for 30 years. I miss that predictability. But in some ways I think predictability can kill us on the inside.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I believe that people are. There's a part of us, if not, there's a part of us that wants to be, that likes that spontaneity. I don't think that anybody wants to know exactly. I mean, here's the thing: people often think they do, but then again, you have movies like Groundhog Day, and people think, "Well, we're going to, geez, Louise, what a hell that is." Well, you know exactly what's going to happen, and you're
Hmm.
going to be safe. You're going to be fed. You're going to be okay. But there's something strange about that. So I think, I don't think people really understand that, even the small, the hard things in life, the things, even if it's not necessarily hard, the things that you don't particularly care for have a place, um, but we're often very narrow-minded and very, immediate results oriented, and we can't see the bigger picture or see far ahead enough to appreciate, or even tolerate the things that we are, um, I would say, unhappy about right now.
Hmm. Hmm. No, I think Groundhog Day is a great, great, great movie. By the way, Bill Murray is really wonderful in that film. And
Great,
I
yeah,
think I think I think there's a really valuable lesson to be learned here that I think with both extremes we will go crazy. Like if we were living in a state where every day was something new, every single day was unknown or this and that, I think and there are people who travel who get on planes every single day and travel the country, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and maybe they like it, but I think even after a while that goes crazy. Several episodes I talked to a guy about traveling, and after a couple weeks you kind of say to yourself, geez, I kind of wish I had a home that I could lay down in, and like
Yeah.
I wish I could just lay in the same bed for a few days in a row, and that would just feel really good. So both extremes of like complete chaos and then complete order and complete monotony every single day kind of can be hell, a hell in themselves. And I think utilizing both these experiences and finding like the middle ground and the huge and the big takeaways from this is really how us as a species kind of moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about the extremes, and humans were often very extreme beings. You know, we either leave way to this side or way to the other side. And then, and we forget that there just might be a very reasonable, cozy middle. You know,
Yeah.
because you're right. I mean, total chaos is. I mean, it's insanity. Imagine you woke up one morning and gravity decided not to work. It's just it'd be horrible. But we believe that the sun is going to rise, you know, just as it did the day before. Gravity is going to hold things down, and because of that order, because of that specific order, there is, you know, there's peace of mind.
Hmm.
So I think that there are things in our lives that are like that, where, you know, we don't want to, we don't want certain things to be spontaneous. Like I don't want my paychecks to be spontaneous. I don't want to, you know what
Yes.
I mean? I don't want to get, you know, $500 today and 25 cents tomorrow, and because it shouldn't be. But there's certain, so it's about finding the balance and finding where each place and each thing belongs.
Right, right. Now, this is interesting. Let's even just think about like the paycheck thing over here because
Yeah.
like I said, as much as I like this idea of a static paycheck that is the same thing every single day, it seems really attractive at first. But I do see the dangers of like stagnation kind of kicking in and complacency kicking in as well. Because like if this, and the reason I have this experience is because I worked with, I was a teacher for a long time and I worked with a lot of teachers. And
Yeah.
being a teacher is a pretty darn standard pay, that paycheck comes pretty darn regularly. You never need to worry. Like it
Yeah.
will be there. You'll have your sick days, you have your paycheck, you've got it's pretty darn thing. But what I noticed, Kenny, is that a lot of these teachers became really, really bitter and miserable as their career kind of went on. And I was scratching my head. I'm like, geez, you guys have stability here. You have a static paycheck. You have everything is fixed. And what ends up happening is that the bloody thing becomes too darn predictable, and it becomes too. Now obviously none of those teachers want to take a job for less money, right? Like they're not going to kind of go there. But when you remove some of the challenge of life and you sort of remove some of that because the challenge brings about growth. And I think we are fundamentally addicted to growth. We have an obsession with growth and getting better. We love to see that. That's why old age scares us, scares us, right? We don't want to see ourselves going decline. We want to see ourselves on the incline, not on the decline. And I think that when we have too much predictability, almost kind of like communism in a way, where everything is just that you will get the same paycheck no matter how hard you work or how little you work. It's just the same every single day. I think that kind of creates like the slow death. I think chaos creates the quick death, but monotony builds within us a slow death, a death of the soul.
Yeah. I mean, I can see, I think I can definitely see that. At the same time, there's something that, you know, in every human being, one of the things about humans is that we are very unique in the sense of choice, very unique in the sense of, you know, what we decide to do. Some people end up being affected negatively by that mundane or that stagnant, repetitive paycheck or occurrence in their life, when another person is perfectly fine with it. And in
Right,
fact,
yeah.
instead of being, you know, as the teacher who is, you know, fed up and just ready to throw a kid through a window, uh, I hear that's the other teacher is actually quite simply grateful, happy that this is so. What the other one sees as a weakness or a flaw in the universe, one has seen as a blessing, a gift, a some sort of anchor in the universe.
Hmm.
So it really does depend on the human mind, on the humans experience. um
No, I think that's we are uniquely different, and you're right. Like I probably was overgeneralizing a moment ago where I said all teachers. You're right. There probably are some teachers who are like, hey man, I love the stability here. I love having my summers off. Like there were there were some folks that did like the steady track, and you're right. These are personality qualities that do vary
yeah.
from person to person. I'm wondering if I think that what it is, though, is that we have to be careful with some people who claim to like stability, but that's kind of a mask for fear. And I think that that is something, and I'm not saying that's everybody, but there might be some people out there who claim, who will outwardly claim, I love stability, I love monotony, I love routine, but it's really just fear, speaking that language. And, one of the examples that always comes to me is like feudalism in medieval Europe. The Vikings, the Visigoths, all of these like people were taking over. So all of these peasants came and became serfs under lords because they wanted to be protected, right? They wanted knights to protect them. They wanted to be taken care of. But I asked myself, did anyone really want to be a serf? Did anyone really want to be a feudal peasant? Probably not. Like, I don't think that was like anyone's, wish at that time. But I think
Peasant school.
yeah, peasant school, right? Like, I'm gonna get my degree in peasantry 101. But like, I think sometimes we make those decisions based out of fear. And when you make those decisions out of fear, there is like an opportunity cost, and you for one don't grow, and humanity doesn't grow at the same time.
Well, see, all life is uncertain. Every single bit of life is uncertain. You wake up in the morning, you don't know whether or not you're going to stub your toe or your bed. You're brushing your teeth in the morning, you have no idea whether or not you're going to, chip a tooth or stab your cheek with your toothbrush. You're eating cereal in the morning, are you gonna choke? I mean, we take all these things for granted.
Oh
we,
my god,
we
you've just
literally
given me a
drive.
thousand things to worry about tomorrow morning. Just thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, there's a lot to worry about. I mean, we get into vehicles that move about 60 to 70 miles per hour,
Yeah.
and we think, oh, I'm a good driver. Well, good for you. How are you so sure the other person on the road is a good driver?
Yeah.
My point is that we are faced with uncertainty, and especially in here, one of the things about uncertainty is that it's often hits us in a negative more than it does in a positive. People are more, how do I say, they are more uncertain of the fact, especially maybe living in a rough neighborhood. They're more uncertain of the fact that they're going to see their car in their driveway in the morning.
Yeah.
No one is thinking, you know what, I'm going to wake up in the morning and have a brand new car. Like, it could go either way. No,
It doesn't go that way. Yeah.
they're thinking, most people are running around thinking, this could be the thing that ends me. This could be the thing that ends me financially, health wise,
Hmm.
career wise. It could finish me. And
Hmm.
so uncertainty is for us a very negative thing because our imagination tends to lean in the negative and in the oppressive. And so, but the problem with that is what you've said earlier is fear. Uncertainty or being afraid of uncertainty is not necessarily, I think that's very natural. That's what happens to, unless of course you're some sort of a superhuman. Some of them are they're out there. It's natural. The problem now becomes, how you say, when you give into that fear, when you totally allow that fear to cripple you. I mean, we have insurance. Our society runs on insurance. What is insurance?
Hmm.
Insurance is selling you certainty. That's all it is. It's a false sense of certainty. Here's insurance. Insurance actually, it's betting against yourself. Okay, talked to a buddy of mine, and he had mentioned this. He said something along the lines of, insurance basically says the bad thing, if the bad thing happens, you're covered, right? But if the bad thing doesn't happen, you're just going to keep paying until the bad thing happens, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, Uh, by the time you spend about $3,000 on this thing, you're looking around the corner waiting. Where the hell is this bad thing? It should happen about
I
now.
want the bad thing to happen, right?
Because
At-
I want to feel like I'm paying for something. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, we live in a world of insurance. We live in a world where people have turned uncertainty into a business model. They
Yes.
want to sell you certainty. And because we're so frightened, so afraid, we're so, in many ways, pathetic, really. Not to be unkind, but it is actually pathetic because we're grown human beings.
Hmm.
Many of us are 60s, 70s, 80s. Many of us are 40s, 30s, and 20s. I can understand children being afraid. I can understand teenagers being afraid. And I can understand even young adults being afraid. But there comes a time when humans need to be humans and be strong, be wise, be courageous. I mean, we have all these ideas that have been written about for ages, but these days we seem to ignore them because for some reason it's like, yeah, I believe in knights, but I don't really want to. I don't really want to leave my house for an adventure. I just kind of want to sit down and watch Netflix. Well, it's strange.
Yeah, it's listen, man, I wish I wish I could say I overcame fear, but no, there's definitely a lot of things that keep me up at night, a lot of things that still give me anxiety. I
Yeah,
guess what it comes down to is I want to put both of us back into like, the prehistoric times.
yeah,
And I think this is kind of looking at the past, the really ancient past can kind of help us solve this. If you were in a place and you saw that your buffalo was running out, you saw
yeah,
that there was less buffalo, you knew it. You saw it every time you went hunting, you just saw less and less of them out there. You have options. You can sit there and you can worry about it. You can live in fear. You could wish and hope that more buffalo just magically come your way, or
yeah,
you could pick up and leave and try and find a new spot. Or better yet, you could start developing agriculture. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm not really seeing as much in our society today of like
yeah,
where we're either at this point where we kind of lament that we don't have stability and we worry over it and we cry over it and we lose sleepless nights, but we don't actually take the actions to create that agriculture or to create terrace farming or to create something new that is going to bring some new form of stability that will then at some later date be destroyed. And then we because I think that's the whole point of life is
yeah,
that we're chasing the stability, but the only way to get to that stability is to constantly keep conquering the challenges before us. And I
yeah,
think that's kind of the beauty of the human experience is that we're constantly faced with uncertainty. Your food is constantly running out, this is running out, but then okay, let's not just hope for things to go back to the way they were magically, right? Let's start making this world a better place by innovating and making new systems, new ways of doing things, new solutions to things.
yeah. I would totally agree. War is the mother of innovation.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Sad quote, but in some
Sad
ways
quote,
true. Yeah.
but it's yeah, it is. I think that's if we embrace the fact, if we understand our world and say, okay, if we embrace the world as this is, this is how the world simply operates. When uncertainty, when especially those things that are fearful, like yeah, before our podcast, you had mentioned World War II.
Yeah.
Um, Nobody was certain that Hitler was going to lose. Many Americans went in there, went to war, being absolutely uncertain about their future, whether they were going to die or live. It was just that simple,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know? And, but they went anyway. They went anyway. And many of them did, in fact, die.
Yeah.
And they won the war. My point is simply this that when uncertainty is not how you say it's not an excuse, or it should not be it shouldn't be something that cripples you, or leaves you in the dust, leaves you, rocking back and forth in the fetal position because you're scared about tomorrow.
Yes.
It's always going to be that way. It's life is always going to be uncertain. I mean, I don't even if they create a machine that you can, matrix up, and you can create your perfect little world, sure, but how long is a machine going to last?
Sure, right?
You know,
It could someone could unplug that thing and you're done. Um,
uncertain uncertainty is always around the corner.
Yeah, I know it's funny because I think even in the Matrix movie itself, it says that when the machines made the first simulation, it was perfect, and people went nuts. Like all the human beings rebelled against it and said, no, 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 this is fake.
Yeah.
And I think we that is true. I think that the writers of that movie were spot on that if it was too cookie cutter, if it was too just formulaic, well, then we would go nuts because we like there to be some degree of uncertainty. And I want us to think about like using our World War II, and maybe we can make like a pandemic kind of comparison here. Is a lot of
Mm.
people, man, if it wasn't for this darn pandemic, everything would be just a-okay right now. Everything would be just darn fine. Everything would be, we would know where we would go. I'm like, not really. I think that the loss of life, the loss of business, all of these things have been just remarkably insane, remarkably insane. As we move forward, this is our Buffalo moment right now. This is a Buffalo moment here where we realize this has kind of shed a bunch of stuff on things that just don't work really well. Here are some things we just never thought of. Here are some things that don't work. We thought they were working, but turns out they actually weren't really working. It looks like the heater wasn't working all along. And I think that creates opportunity. It creates that opportunity to be like, how do we, now that we've learned all of these lessons, how do we create that much better tomorrow? Like, how do we create agriculture from the lack of buffalo? So in this world, like we've had a lot of businesses shut down. People have lost their life savings. It's no joke, and they might even be in debt to the bank. So now we have to ask ourselves, how do we fix these problems? We prevent them from happening. How do we make businesses stronger? How do we make all of these things work more efficiently? And I think that challenge is something that we have to address. You know what I mean? I think just sitting and praying and just hope it just like a dark cloud just passes away is not the answer. I think it doesn't actually solve itself until we start addressing it and we start kind of demanding and creating a better world for ourselves.
Okay. Now, I agree with you, by the way. But I
Yeah,
want to ask you a question.
sure.
Are you talking about individual lives, or are you talking about on a national level, like national status of change?
I think like our in our previous discussion, I think it's twofold. I think first, we can't do anything as a nation until individually we are making better choices, and that is with 100% certainty that like if we individually are failing every single day, well then like I said, if everyone is a tiny little piece of mud and you put all that mud together, you just get a giant pile of mud, and no one wants a giant pile of mud. So the first way that we do this is we clean ourselves off and we make sure that we are the best, most precious. We turn each of us has to become like a diamond, and then you put all the diamonds together, and now you got a sparkling pile of diamonds. So I think that, yeah, we need to start correcting ourselves individually. And you know what? I've always said that prior to the pandemic, I think one thing that was really, really in shortage was goodness and kindness to one another. I've always felt that was something that was lacking at the very individual level. And a lot of our systems and a lot of the way we treat other people and a lot of the way we took people for granted was a huge freaking problem. And that's something that we can all do. Even if you're just a more appreciative of your wife, more appreciative of your kids, more appreciative of that good friend, more appreciative of that, of anyone in your life that brings value. I think right off the bat, that's something that the pandemic has kind of taught us is like you live with these people 24/7. Like start valuing them, start cherishing them, start building them, start helping to build them up. And I think once we start doing that, each of our families becomes a diamond, and then we can start coming together on the more national collective level.
I think you're right. Unfortunately, as much as no, I'm serious. And as much as I do believe there is something in what you're saying. I at the same time, I'm incredibly pessimistic about all that. Um, I do think
I'm being a
that.
hyper idealist right now, so I'm glad that I'm seriously. I'm glad that you're, the anchor bringing me down to reality, because I know that I'm being a hyper idealist right now. But yeah, please, I love your.
But yeah, I think the ideal is perfectly beautiful. I think it's I but I think I'm pessimistic about it because I don't think that first of all, human beings are very self-oriented. We're very, how you say, selfish, basically.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily um, the worst of our traits. Right now, most people are thinking simply about themselves and their family, and even within their family, they're thinking simply about themselves. If they're honest with themselves, and a lot of Americans feel very uncertain about the things going on right now. I mean, even but and to tie it back to World War II, we're living in a very different time because we're dealing with a with World War II, we're dealing with a very, very strong generation. Unfortunately, we are no, they were, I mean, fortunately for them, they were very strong
Yeah,
men
they had
and
to be.
women. They were, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Many of them still fresh off the boat, immigrants. Many of them still, had those family ties. Many of them, I mean, hardworking Italians, Irish, Englishmen. I mean, these were people coming to America, or ancestors, short term. I mean, not far removed from ancestors coming from the old country
sure.
to America. All right, and right now everybody's fat and happy. And the
Well,
truth
I think they're
is,
fat. I don't know about happy.
yeah, yeah, I'll have one more Big Mac, please. So the the truth is, I think that I mean, I was listening to a conversation. A YouTuber had played live, not live, but actual clip from a CNN talk. And in this talk, somebody, I'm not is find out for yourself. Somebody was saying something along the lines of deplatforming YouTubers who had too much following and were quote unquote radical.
Hmm.
And the first thought that came to my mind was, you couldn't get away with that in old America. No way. You couldn't get away with that
Yeah,
because you can't come on free on public, on a public communication platform and say, hey, we need to we need to make sure certain people don't get to speak on public communication platforms. So we're living in a very different time. Hopefully, I know that a lot of Americans are going through a lot of hard things right now, and personally, I have no idea what to say to them because I have no idea who I'm talking to. No idea, but collectively as a nation, still pessimistic, bruv.
well,
Still
let
pessimistic.
me see if I can come in there and help you. So
Please.
I think one of the issues, and this is something I kind of agree with you on the pessimism boat. I thought that before the pandemic, people weren't talking to one another and not listening to one another. I thought that was a huge problem in this country prior to the pandemic. And sadly, the pandemic has kind of made that worse. And I think that what I'm trying to do, especially with this podcast and just in general with my interactions with my fellow man, is I'm trying to teach them that you can't really get through disasters if there's no communication in place. If you don't know, even if you don't agree with somebody, when the next disaster comes along or the next big hurdle comes along, that's going to prevent us from moving forward. If you don't have a common respect or a common decency for your fellow man, it actually has a selfish kind of connotation to it when you really think about it, Kenny. Because when we think about looking out for our fellow human being, listening to our fellow human being, we think that, oh, that's altruism, or that's, I'm like, it's not really. It's basically this idea that if I don't know what's going on with my neighbors, if I don't know what's going on, well, that kind of jeopardizes my own family. It jeopardizes my safety because if everything is being neglected around me, this guy made up a really good point. I was listening to this podcast and he was talking about gated communities in like South America. And I'm
Yeah.
like, is that real freedom where you can't walk like 10 blocks, and if you leave your gated community, you're almost certain to be robbed or what, it's like that's not real freedom where your entire life exists within like, a 10 block radius, and if you go beyond this border, your life is over. Like even if you're a king, it's like you think about the king in medieval Europe, he's got like a moat and you put alligators in the moat, right? And it's like, is that really fun? The guy can't, if the guy leaves his castle, he's going to be attacked by some random peasants who are, who haven't had anything to eat in 4 days. That's not really fun. So I think that, and it's not sustainable either. It's not sustainable. And what I'm hoping is that what we learn is that that, yeah, we got to take care of ourselves. Like, I'm not trying to negate that. But
Yeah,
once we've taken care of ourselves to some degree, if we're not being more open, more compassionate, and more verbal with our fellow man, well, we're not going to be able to kind of overcome any dangers in this world. When we built those river valleys, when we built really extensive irrigation systems so that we could begin agriculture. One dude can't do that. One dude is not capable of building an entire irrigation system around the Nile and creating that system. That took tons and tons of people working in unison with one another. And if we want to do great stuff, people think of Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. That's fantastic. What about all the thousands of NASA employees who helped build the rockets and the engineers? And, like, not one man just didn't build a rocket by himself and go to the moon. It took a coordinated effort to do these things. And I think that if we don't learn to communicate with people who we disagree with, or people
absolutely.
that we find to be unsavory or distasteful or whatever, we're not going to be able to take huge big scale actions. We're not going to be able to build the Great Wall. We're not going to be able to go to Mars. We're not going to be able to do any of the cool fun stuff that makes our existence worthwhile. So I think we have to overcome this. And it saddens me that the pandemic did not push us further in that direction.
No, it's the old saying is that someone once gave the example that says, you don't when you go down to your cellar, you turn on the lights and you see rats scurrying about because they've been frightened by the lights. You don't say to yourself, "Well, look what the lights has brought. The lights has brought with its rats." No, the right thing is look what the light has revealed.
Yes.
So
I like that.
the pandemic did not bring with it this even more difficult strain of communication, this antagonistic posture towards Americans. It simply revealed it all the more. Now you had somebody who's been waiting to scream at his neighbor for the past 4 years finally got a chance to say, "Hey, put your mask on." Just screamed it in his face. Or, "Why are you wearing a mask?" Just screamed it in his face. It's not because of the mask. It's just because he's been waiting to scream at him and just
Mhm.
got the most available opportunity.
See, now this is something that I do think we're at. The reason that I chose this episode for today is, obviously, I am aware of current events and so forth. And with the changing of the guard, with the changing of the president, I think that in many respects, Kenny,
Yes.
something that's more powerful than force is mercy, and the ability to be like, okay, I've won, I'm now in power. However, my friend, pull up a chair and come take a seat at this table with us because you're welcome here. And one thing I'll tell you, man, I've this hasn't happened to me too often, but it has happened a
Talk to
few
me.
times in my life where sometimes, like, I've had a student, for example,
Yeah.
that really screwed up, really, really screwed up royally. But I saw that they proactively apologized. I saw that they kind of looked remorseful. And you have two options at this point. You could punish them, or you could say to yourself, man, it looks like you know what you've done is wrong. Like, welcome back into the club, sir. And again, sometimes they're not remorseful, and you do have to punish them, and you do have to take further actions and so forth. I do think that we are at a very critical point where people are screaming and begging for unity, and the power of mercy and the power of like being like, hey, the war is over now, come take a seat.
Yeah.
And to really lean on history here, one of the mistakes that we made at the end of World War I is that we punished Germany too darn much. We punished Germany too much. We made them pay for the entire war. We destroyed their economy. We made them sign the Treaty of Versailles. And what happened? Well, that led to the rise of Hitler. After World War II, we got it right. We said, hey, you messed up, but here's some money, go rebuild yourself. And that's what actually has created so much peace, is that idea of being like, we won. It's clear that we won. But let's rebuild this relationship, and let's rebuild what was destroyed, because there is a danger that when you've won the battle, like it's kind of like when a boxing match is going on, you got your knockout, and everyone needs to know that you are the victor of that boxing match. But you don't start kicking the guy when he's unconscious on the floor. That's it. And I think
Yeah.
that's what makes this time period so critical. If we screw this up and we over punish, we're really going in a disastrous direction. This is a critical, like, we just had a changing of the guard. Now's the time for mercy, and now is the time for peace.
Says, where are you going? Says, I'm going to a place where I can see with eyes unclouded with hate. I
Yeah.
think that it's possible to do that, but Americans or whoever is in charge has to see with eyes unclouded with hate, and simply a matter of either duty or something higher than base and uncontrolled passions. I hope for the best. I hope for the best, my good man, and I want to believe. I want to believe that it'll turn out. It'll turn out well.
We can't just The problem is, as citizens, I think we can't just sit there and be like, well, let's see what leader does. I don't think, leader may make the right choice. Leader may not make the right choice. Like, I think regardless of what leader decides to do, we have that power. I feel like we have that power to
We the
start.
individuals.
Yeah, we as individuals have that power to start mending relationships, start having the power to start communicating with people, and start listening to one another again.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think
I would like to see that.
and I
Yeah,
think that would be the bringing of light into darkness in some way. And I think that we kind of it's kind of more of instead of waiting for the sun, we do have light switches in our rooms that we can turn on. We don't have
yeah,
to just sit there and wait for leader to act. We don't have to wait for divine intervention. I think that God wants us to actually start being better to one another. I've always said that, like, if God didn't want us here, he would not have put us here. Like, it's just as simple as that, right? Like nothing in your house is there by accident. Everything in your house has a purpose. Maybe you haven't used it in 5 years, but when you bought it, it had a purpose. And that's the same thing with us as human beings. If there was a human that wasn't meant to be here, they probably would just not be here. And that's the thing that's missing from all of us, is that everyone was meant to be here. It's how we utilize them that is going to really determine the future.
yeah, yeah. I think you said it well, and I hope that people will see that, will hear that, and mercy and love, kindness towards one another
Mm-mm.
would be somehow communicated. Um, but I think you're right. I think that's really what I think that's what's really needed here. What's
Now,
really needed now.
absolutely. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we end out here
Talk to me.
is, I think that I'm always thinking about, like, I'm always thinking in my head, what if I'm talking to the most selfish person on the face of the earth, right? Like, what's in it for me? What do I have to gain from this, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I think that it actually solves the problem of uncertainty, because a lot of our anxiety is caused by uncertainty. And let's just pretend that somebody is angry at you, or you don't know that they're angry at you, right? You're like, man, I haven't heard from this person. Maybe they're angry at me. Maybe they're not angry at me. I don't know. I'm uncertain about it.
yeah,
Well, the easiest way to kind of fix that is to bring certainty to uncertainty and pick up the phone and call them, and to, like, start seeing what's going on there. And you may not like the result, you may not like the outcome, but I guarantee you your anxiety is going to be lowered, because at the very least, where people are at, and you can proceed from there. And a lot of what we read in the newspaper, I read the Times and Wall Street Journal, a lot of it is written in such a way of, like, We will see if these people just magically change. I've never seen any newspaper article, not a single one, Kenny, that actually like an op-ed in any of these newspapers that say, pick up the phone and do this, or call somebody, or reach out to a Democrat, reach out to a Republican. And I've never seen anybody actually make a call to arms in that way. It's always as if like they're an unknown, uncontrollable force out there in the universe, and hopefully they just come to their senses. And I'm hoping, Kenny, that we see a change to that. And I'm not hoping, I'm kind of insisting that we all take some action and make sure that we start getting closer to rectifying that uncertainty.
Yeah,
Kenny, thank you so much for shining a small beacon of light on here.
no worries. Thank you for having me.
This concludes the 107th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.